Good evening, you're watching No Spin. I'm Nidhi Razdan. The rupee hit an all-time low today. It has in fact fallen 5% in the last 6 months. There are a number of reasons for this. Among them, the Ukraine war, inflation, rate hikes, lockdowns in China, all of which have jolted investors. Foreign funds are also pulling out of India. In fact, they've been moving out of India for the last 7 months, looking for safer assets amid all the uncertainty. So what does a weak rupee mean for you and me? It basically means higher costs to import goods like fuel, which India is heavily dependent on. And more expensive fuel in turn means a further hike in prices. Travel is going to be more expensive, so are foreign studies. All of this affects our day-to-day lives. Priyanshi has the story.
The rupee weakened to an all-time low today of 77 rupees and 46 paise to a dollar. The Indian currency has depreciated almost 5% in just the last 6 months, as it stood around 74 rupees per dollar in November last year. There are several connected reasons behind the slump. A combination of low foreign funds in India with a rising requirement is pushing the rupee down. Indian markets have witnessed the highest ever recorded foreign fund pullout this year, with $17.7 billion being withdrawn in just a little over 4 months. Foreign investors have remained net sellers in Indian markets and have withdrawn money for each of the last 7 months. The war in Ukraine continuing for the 3rd month, lockdowns in China followed by soaring inflation and rate hikes across countries are all factors pushing investors back to safe investing destinations such as the United States. An uncertain environment has turned investors to the US dollar, that is considered a reserve and a safe currency in times of global stress. A soaring demand has taken the dollar to a 2-decade high, further pressurizing the rupee's value. And lastly, a 15% increase in the price of Brent crude prices has further resulted in foreign currency outflows in terms of import payments.
If this remains for the rest of the year, we can intuitively see that the overall cost of imported oil would go up by around 4.5 billion rupees. So there's a direct relationship between exchange rate and our overall import bill in rupee terms.
Apart from impacting markets, the rupee's depreciation drives up the cost of living, affecting the prices of essentials for the common man. When the rupee depreciates, everything we import gets more expensive. As for $1 worth of products, we now have to pay more in rupees. Already soaring crude oil prices will now translate into even larger payments in rupee terms. And increasing oil import prices further translate into higher domestic fuel prices, which have a cascading impact on overall inflation. A higher cost of transportation in turn pushes up the prices of all essential products. Along with this, the cost of foreign studies and foreign travel also increases with the rupee's worth reducing. But there's an upside too. Indian exports now get more competitive as foreign importers now have to pay less in terms of their currency. The Congress hit out at the Prime Minister digging up his old tweets and videos before he became the PM, and had then said that the weakening rupee was in ICU. With no signs of global supply disruptions easing amid the war, the pressure on the rupee is expected to continue. This will hurt the common man who is already struggling with price rises across commodities. Priyanshi Sharma for NDTV.
Supriya Srinath, Congress spokesperson, joining us this evening. Also, Professor Govardhan Das of the BJP, professor at JNU as well. Thank you, both of you, for being with us. Supriya Srinath, to you first. Is it fair to put the entire blame on the weakening rupee on the government, given that there are so many external factors at play, particularly at this time?
But these were exactly the factors at play when the rupee fell while we were in power. So I think we're just returning favor, politically speaking. But if I were to step back and take an economic view of things, there are 4 factors why the rupee is falling. Of course, high inflation is one factor. The acute economic slowdown is the other factor. India's trade deficit, which has gone up by 88% and is not being spoken about, is one such factor. And capital outflows. Please remember, our forex reserves are down by nearly $44 billion in just the last 4 months. It has fallen below $600 billion for the first time in multiple years. So what is happening right now is that the Reserve Bank of India uses forex reserves to defend the rupee, but it's to no avail. 77.46 to a dollar. That's where the rupee is. So I think we are trying to show the mirror to the government at one step, but there is also an opportunity there. A falling rupee is very good for exports. It's great for IT companies, provided we can build an environment where exporters, and especially the job guzzling exporters, could put in their money, could create those jobs. But we are not going to do that, because guess what? When China and US were fighting, the major chunk of business from China went to Bangladesh and Vietnam, but did not come to India. So if we had the sense, we would have created opportunities for exporters to leverage a weak rupee. But I don't see that happening, because the priority still continues to be headline management. The last 2 seconds I will take, just the last 2 seconds. We woke up to a huge headline in today's newspapers. What was the headline? When pandemic hit and our ratings could be downgraded to junk, the government was looking to build a narrative. Instead of addressing the fundamentals of the economy, this government is obsessed with managing headlines. You've got to manage the economy. You've got to manage the micros and the macros, and not the headlines.
Let me take that to Professor Das. Professor Das, the other issue, though, apart from the immediate crisis in Ukraine and all that global uncertainty, is the fact that foreign funds have steadily been pulling out of India for the last 7 months. The Ukraine war has been at play now for over 2 months. Why is that happening? And does that indicate a larger problem, a larger lack of confidence in the India story at the moment?
See, Nidhi, good evening, and good evening, my fellow panelists. Actually, see, right now, what rupee value versus in against the dollar, little bit certainly is low, and this happens because of there are a few factors that includes weak export numbers, drop of domestic consumption, and increased energy price, and fear of soaring inflation. All these are happening right at this moment. That include because of long lockdown, and also because of the war situation. And my fellow panelists actually forgot to mention that during the Congress period, they used that the oil bonds. That also one of the reason probably today today's what the rupee depreciation, because the country was in debt because of the oil bonds. And what I would like to mention here, that's what she's trying to say, that our economy is not really doing good. Today, the Indian economy is doing better than ever. That's because we have this reserve of $600 billion. We have the highest GST collection. We have the highest stock market forever. And remember, last 2 years, it was a kind of a lockdown situation, pandemic situation, and India had to deal with 1.3 billion people. And also, we have given the 1.9 billion doses of vaccines. All these accounts together, if you look at this situation in the global situation,
so you are arguing that India is relatively better off than other economies.
And not only that, another thing I would like to mention is not only the Indian rupee. If you look at the Chinese yen, if you look at the Japanese yen, they are also falling with respect to dollars. So it's not the specific to India. Why to
so Priya, do you want to take that on? Yes. I mean, is there a selective reading of by the opposition about what is wrong with the economy versus what is going right?
No, I don't think the opposition is reading the data. The data is coming from the government. The country is reading it. They are talking about, and I think the selective interpretation of the economy has to stop. India's urban unemployment is close to levels of 10%. Do you believe that's a good economy? Do you believe $192 billion trade deficit is a good economy? Do you believe that, and don't talk about China and the yuan and the yen. We are the worst performing currency in Asia, period. Why are we the worst? Why were we worst affected by the pandemic? We are going to take up till 2035 to reach the pre-pandemic levels. And we are not saying that. Data by the government and the RBI is telling us that. 1.9 billion vaccines, that is something for you to do. You've got to manage the resources. You talk about debt. Our debt levels right now are unprecedented. 90% of the GDP debt is what India is reporting. I also want to say, stop talking about the stock market, sir. And I say that as a natural citizen of this country. There are 3 crore people in this country who invest in stock markets. There are 137 crore people outside the stock markets who are bearing the brunt of high inflation, high food prices, high fuel prices.
Let me ask
Please
Professor
understand
Das
the
about
other
that.
prices where they
Because
are.
it's very clear that people are already struggling, Professor Das, with high prices. There is inflation. And as a result of this depreciation of the rupee, we are expecting now further rise in prices because fuel is going to become more expensive, etc. So how long should the common man be prepared to deal with this? Are you going to be honest here and say that we're looking at some very, very tough few months, maybe longer?
See, this is not the specific to India. It's all over the world. This is what we are is going through. It's not that specific to India in any way. And what she's trying to say, is not the you say Asia. We are doing worst in Asia. Your favorite country, the Pakistan, which is doing inflation is more than 13%. By the way, they take the number.
You know, that's the problem, Nidhi. Can I please come with a
Go
retort here? The problem here is that somebody who I thought, because he puts a professor or something, I thought he's an educated person. When you're having a debate on the economy and when you are talking about the rupee at 77.46, I could have made it a very ugly political debate and asked him the question that Modi ji to 40 par lane wale the dollar ko, 78 pe pahunchne wala hai dollar. Petrol and diesel is already across 100. It looks like the rupee is also running towards 100. I could have made it an ugly debate. What did he say? Please keep quiet for a minute. I did not speak while you were talking. Please offer me the same courtesy. He gets in Pakistan. Forget about Pakistan. Why are we performing worse than Bangladesh and Vietnam on exports? Will you be able to tell me? Because your government is too busy managing headlines instead of managing the economy. You do not care about how the common people are reeling under the pressure of high inflation. You want to keep blaming the Congress governments. You want to blame Nehru for the rupee now. That's what your thinking is. मैं economy की बात कर रही हूँ, आप पाकिस्तान मेरी favorite country ला रहे हो. Favorite country तो
Professor Das. Professor Das, is there too much of a focus on narrative management? Is there too much of a focus on narrative management in the government rather than managing the economy and everything else?
Of course, government is doing of its best. I mean, when she said this, we are doing worst in Asia. That's what I bring the issue of Pakistan. So it's not that because of I wanted to bring the Pakistan issue. See,
at least compare yourself to the top 5 Asian economies to begin with. Compare yourself to a China and a Japan. You will not do that. You're comparing yourself to Pakistan.
Chinese. See, come on. You only said that you compare China. China's yen is also falling against US dollar.
Performing economy right now in the world. We were one of the top 5. So we've gone to the bottom 7. Do you realize what you have done to this economy structurally? You've destroyed this economy. You have halved the growth rate even before COVID came to us. From 8.2%, we began growing at 4.1% before COVID. Unemployment was at a 45-year high before
Professor
COVID.
Das, my question though got unanswered. Do we have to prepare for pain for the next foreseeable future?
We are the government is trying to do its best, and government is doing better. See that what the Congress government last 6 years, what they did is that they put corruption and the deficit in every places, including the oil bond issues, and money is gone. If you don't allow to others to speak, then there is the problem.
Professor Das, go ahead. I have 30 seconds.
Problem. So that's because of all these reasons that today India has to come back on its foot. India has to go for the development. And during this last 2 years,
are you saying that today's economy, the problems we're facing is because of what the Congress did?
Yes, that is what Congress
But you're in power. The BJP is in power since 2014.
Yes, this is, see, 60 years, the corruption cannot be corrected in 5 years, right?
Can I please come in?
I'm actually
Nidhi,
speechless at this point because the
Nidhi.
economy is squarely this government's responsibility. How long are we going to blame previous governments now? Not in the eighth year of Mr. Modi's prime ministership. Mr. Das, Supriya, I have exactly 20 seconds. I have to end it.
I will
Supriya.
finish my argument in 10 seconds.
Please.
You have collected 27 lakh crore rupees through fuel taxes, the central government alone. All that you have spent on oil bonds is 75,000 crore rupees, which is not even 3% of that. So stop lying to the people of this country. Stop thinking we are all fools, because we are not. You
have to leave it at that tonight.
this
It's a
economy.
story we're going to continue to focus on during the rest of the week as well. It's not over yet. Many other issues as far as the economy's weaknesses are being thrown up every day. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us. Well, in a major move today, the centre has done a U-turn on the controversial Sedition Law, saying that it will re-examine it. The government says this has come under orders from the Prime Minister himself. This comes just a day ahead of a crucial Supreme Court hearing on this matter tomorrow. Just 2 days ago, the government had actually defended the colonial-era Sedition Law and asked the Supreme Court to dismiss the pleas challenging it. So what has brought about this about turn, and what does that mean? Joining us now to talk about this and other challenges facing the judiciary at this time is Advocate Abhinav Chandrachud, who's also the author of a new biography on one of India's finest constitutional voices, Mr. Soli Sorabji. Thank you very much, Abhinav Chandrachud, for joining us. Just wanted your first thoughts, on the government stand on the Sedition Law today. Do you welcome this change of heart?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, any decision by the government to revisit the colonial era sedition law is something that should be welcomed. Of course, I don't want to speak too soon. We have to see in what way the government is now going to propose changes to the sedition law. Of course, I've been saying for a very long time that even if the government doesn't want to completely do away with sedition, there are various amendments that can be brought about to the law of sedition. For instance, I mean, since 1832 onwards in England, sedition always was a bailable offence. It was always what we would refer to as a non-cognizable offence. It was made a cognizable offence for the first time in 1974. We as independent Indians inflicted this wound on ourselves. In other words, in England in 1832, you needed a warrant from a magistrate in order to investigate a case of sedition. But from 1974 in India, when the Criminal Procedure Code came into being, even without a warrant from a magistrate, the police can investigate a case of sedition. Similarly, a case of sedition in England in 1832 onwards was considered to be bailable. In other words, the moment you were accused of the offence of sedition, you were entitled to be released on bail as a matter of right. Now, the British may have made it non-bailable in India. There's no reason why we should not make it bailable. Of course, in England, sedition has long ceased to be an offence on the statute books. So if there's a complete deletion of sedition from the statute books, that's excellent. The law as it presently stands, of course, is that only a call to violent action on the part of the reader or listener would constitute sedition. But really the manner in which the law of sedition is being used by the government, if you look at the prosecution rates and you look at the conviction rates, you'll see that a very small, a microscopic minority of cases actually result in conviction. So the idea is quite clear. The government is not prosecuting people in order to convict them. The government is prosecuting them in order to silence its critics. I'm not talking about this government. I'm saying any dispensation, any political regime will use a law of this nature to silence its critics. So let's either delete it from the books, or if you don't want to delete it, let's defang it. Let's remove the clause.
Right. I think that's very well put, because we have seen, as you mentioned in what your answer just now, that the Supreme Court actually had put in safeguards in place as far as sedition was concerned, and yet various governments have continued to misuse it. But it's not just true of sedition, Mr. Chandrachud. If we look at other laws as well that are currently on our statute books, are you worried that there is increasingly a tendency to misuse them? For example, you have the UAPA, which is a very tough anti-terror law that is now being used, for instance, against journalists reporting in J&K, for example, or those who took part in the anti-CAA protests, for which the Delhi High Court actually came down very heavily on the police. Are you concerned that other laws too are increasingly being misused?
Well, of course, as a lawyer, I can tell you that the mere possibility that a law will be misused is no reason for that law to completely be done away with or anything of the sort. Of course, the manner in which the law is used can always be gone into by the courts. But we as citizens always have to be very careful, because any government, I'm not talking about this government, I'm not talking about this political dispensation, will always try to ensure that the checks and balances that exist against any powerful regime are weakened. And what are those checks and balances? Number one, the fourth estate in the form of a free press. So the government may try and really threaten journalists or whatever it may be. This has been done for years on end. It's happened decades before as well. The government may try and weaken the states by enacting laws in the form of money bills to ensure that the Rajya Sabha really doesn't have a say. The states don't really have a say in the form of checks and balances. It may try and weaken the independence of the judiciary, because the judiciary constitutes really the greatest check and balance on any powerful government. So we as a citizen really have to be careful, not just in this regime, but in any regime, that really the checks and balances that exist in any constitutional regime are always preserved.
Can I be honest here and say, since you brought up the institution of the media and the judiciary, honestly, a large section of the media, I believe, as a journalist, is not doing its job today and its duty. Do you honestly believe, hand on your heart, that the judiciary is doing the checks and balances that it should when it comes to the executive's excesses?
Well, Nidhi, to tell you honestly, I practice as a lawyer at the Bombay High Court. I'm in the Bombay High Court day in and day out. And I see the way in which the judges of the High Court work from 10:30 in the morning to 7 in the evening every day. And really, with my hand on my heart, I can say that the judiciary is working tirelessly to protect the rights of citizens. It may very well be that there are a few cases that attract a great deal of media attention. Is the system perfect? The answer is no. There's always room for improvement. But I do feel that we have a very vibrant judiciary, and we need to do everything that we can to ensure that the independence of the judiciary is preserved and the judiciary as an institution is strengthened.
All right. Although many would sort of disagree with that at the moment, habeas corpus petitions have been lying unheard for a long time. The Supreme Court hasn't heard the case on electoral bonds, 370 and so much more. But I just wanted your thoughts. You've written this biography on Mr. Sorabji, and he was such a fine man, Attorney General twice. He was the Solicitor General of India during the emergency. It's a very tough time to defend the government. How do you think he would have been looking at the way things are playing out today, with misuse of laws, with the sort of burden on the judiciary as well?
Well, as a historian, I of course I'm a part-time historian. I'm really a lawyer by profession. I've studied history. And the first lesson that you learn in history is that you don't look at the present time, or you don't try and draw lessons. You don't say, look, what are the lessons that we can learn today from this era in history? But one particularly interesting thing, I really want to say this, is that Mr. Sorabji, when he was a private lawyer in the 1990s, he saw the trust vote that took place in I believe it was 1996. Vajpayee had lost the trust vote after being in power for 13 days. And of course, Sorabji used to write articles in the Times of India. He had a column in the Times of India, and he wrote that, of course, he praised Vajpayee. He thought Vajpayee was excellent. But he wrote an article in the Times of India in 1996 saying that the BJP needs to, and I quote, the BJP needs to shed its obsession with demolishing mosques, and it needs to replace Hindutva with Bharatva. Now, the question that I ask you is that, is it conceivable for any government today to reach out to one of its intellectual opponents in this manner and appoint that person as a law officer, or give that person any position of power? That's something that really we have to think about today. That here is a person who very strongly criticized the ideology of the government, and that government reached out to that person and made him the highest law officer of the country.
You're right. You're probably not going to ever see that happen in the near future, at least. But Abhinav Chandrachud, thank you very much for joining us on these important issues facing the judiciary today. The Sedition Law developments, very important. And once again, congratulations on the book on Mr. Soli Sorabji. Thanks very much.